Your full legal name for the record.
Jasmine L. Phil.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please describe for the court the educational background.
I presently hold a PhD in clinical psychology and a postdoctoral specialization in forensics.
How many times have you been an expert witness?
25 times.
How much are you getting paid for this testimony today?
$150.
Did you perform an evaluation on Mr. Bumble?
Yes, I did.
Why were you asked to evaluate Mr. Bumble?
I was asked to evaluate Mr. Bumble so that I could provide my professional opinion as to whether he is competent to stand trial.
What legal definition is applicable to the referral question that you addressed when assessing Mr. Bumble?
The legal definition for competency to stand trial falls under the provision of Title 18, U.S. Code Section 4241. This states that a defendant can be found incompetent by a federal judge if, as a result of a mental disease or defect, the defendant is unable to understand the nature and consequences of the proceedings against him or is unable to assist properly in his own defense.
What procedures and/or tests did you perform during your evaluation?
The assessment procedure contained a battery of psychological tests. The tests included the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale 3, the Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Test, the Personality Assessment Inventory, the Rorschach Inkblot Test using the Exnor scoring system, the Bender Motor Gestalt Test, the Bender Motor Gestalt Test Recall, Ray's 15-item test, the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, and a structured interview of reported symptoms. The MacArthur Competency Assessment Tool for Criminal Adjudication was additionally administered, and I also, in addition to the psychological testing, I conducted multiple interviews with Mr. Bumble and reviewed several documents, including various FBI reports and incident reports regarding Mr. Bumble. I also reviewed his medical and mental health records.
What were your results of the evaluation?
Mr. Bumble is experiencing severe emotional distress. He is very fearful and easily frightened and generally apprehensive. He additionally has concentration and attention difficulties, memory difficulties, and poor judgment. He displays overall thinking and reasoning abilities which only exceed 1% of adults his age. Mr. Bumble may experience great difficulty in keeping up with his peers in a wide variety of situations that require age-appropriate thinking and reasoning abilities. On the Verbal Comprehension Index, Mr. Bumble's performance is somewhat less well-developed than that of his peers. His ability to understand and respond to verbally presented material is better than that of only 9% of others his age.
Why do you believe that Mr. Bumble is competent or not competent to stand trial?
In my opinion, Mr. Bumble is legally incompetent to stand trial.
Why do you believe that Mr. Bumble is incompetent or competent to stand trial? Oh, incompetent to stand trial, I apologize.
Mr. Bumble suffers from mental impairment that renders him incompetent to stand trial. He does not have an adequate understanding of the legal process, and due to his psychosis, he is unable to assist his attorney in providing him with any factual information. Thus, I had to render him incapable of assisting his attorney in planning his defense. He is also incapable of challenging witnesses relevantly due to his mental impairment.
Did you arrive at a diagnosis for Mr. Bumble?
Yes, I did.
What is your diagnosis?
In my opinion, Mr. Bumble has chronic schizophrenia paranoid type.
Can you describe for the court the reason for the diagnosis?
During the evaluation, Mr. Bumble displayed many symptoms of schizophrenia, to include paranoid delusions and auditory hallucinations that have been present for most of his adult life.
Is that diagnosis considered to be a mental disease or a defect?
Yes, it is.
Why?
Mr. Bumble's mental illness has caused a change in his thinking, emotions, and behavior. He is impulsive, psychotic, he cannot think logically, and this places him at an increased risk of making poor judgments in which he could fail to anticipate the consequences of his actions.
Do you believe Mr. Bumble understands proceedings today?
No, I do not.
Why not?
In addition to displaying significant difficulty in thinking logically and coherently, Mr. Bumble has a tendency to misperceive events and has a diminished capability to come to a reasonable conclusion about relationships between events. Mr. Bumble does not appear to understand the procedures he would face in an upcoming trial.
Do you think Mr. Bumble understands what he is charged with?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Mr. Bumble displays a good understanding of the charges against him and is aware of the possible penalties in the case. He recognizes that his current situation is serious and has serious consequences.
You think Mr. Bumble can work with his attorney to successfully defend himself?
No, I do not.
Why not?
Due to his mental illness and extreme paranoia, Mr. Bumble is not capable of providing his attorney with factual information, nor does he have the ability to provide a relevant testimony. Additionally, due to Mr. Bumble's psychotic symptoms, he is not able to consider realistically all of the defenses available to him at this time or challenge witnesses.
Do you have any other information about Mr. Bumble that you feel would be helpful to the court?
At this time, I have no additional information to offer.